Welcome to Speak English Avenue, my dear friends. Today we talk about something that changes everything. Your mind is the most powerful tool you own, but most people never learn to control it. Every morning you wake up with a choice. You either lead your mind or it leads you. Think about the last time fear stopped you cold. Think about the dream you quietly gave up on. Why do some people rise while others fall? Why do some keep going when others quit? The answer is not talent, not luck, not money. The answer lives inside the discipline of your mind. A weak mind finds reasons to stay in bed. A strong mind finds reasons to get back up. You cannot build a strong life with weak thoughts. Every great story began with one disciplined decision. The noise around you will always be very loud. The question is whether your focus is even louder. Your mind will tell you that you are tired. Your mind will say the road is too hard. But that voice is not truth, it is fear. Discipline is what you choose when fear speaks loudest. You have seen people with less than you have. They built more because they controlled what was inside. Every champion woke up when the world was sleeping, not because they loved pain, but they loved purpose. One day you looked at your life and wondered how you arrived at this quiet, empty place. That day, something small began to shift inside you. A voice whispered that you were meant for more. Most people wake up every single day the same way. They reach for their phone before they reach for purpose. They scroll through other people's lives, other people's wins, and slowly their own mind begins to drift away. They do not decide what to think about today. Their mind just wanders wherever the world pulls it. This is not living. This is simply being carried. A leaf does not choose where the river goes. And that is exactly how most people spend life, moved by moods, by news, by other people's opinions. But the person who disciplines their mind wakes differently. They open their eyes and immediately set their direction. They ask themselves, what matters most to me today? They remind themselves who they are trying to become. This is not magic. This is not some rare gift. This is simply the practice of leading your own mind. Because your mind is like a wild and restless horse. Left alone, it runs in every dangerous direction it finds. But with a firm and patient and consistent hand, that same horse becomes the vehicle that carries you forward. Most people are exhausted not from working too hard. They are exhausted from fighting a mind they never trained. Every anxious thought that loops is an untrained mind speaking. Every moment of self-doubt is a mind left without direction. When you do not lead your mind, someone else will. Advertisers will lead it. Social media will lead it daily. Fear will lead it quietly every single morning you wake. And you will spend your whole life reacting, not choosing. Think about the people you admire most in this world. They are not people with no fear or no doubt. They are people who looked at their own wandering mind and made a firm decision to take back full control. They started small, maybe just one focused hour each day. 1 hour where they told their mind exactly where to go. And slowly that 1 hour became their whole entire identity. Discipline spread from one corner of life to every corner. Because the mind is not just where your thoughts live. The mind is where your entire future is quietly being built. Every thought you allow to stay becomes a belief system. Every belief system becomes the action you take or avoid. And every action taken or avoided writes the story of your life. So who is holding the pen right now, you or fear? You were not born to be pulled in every direction. You were not designed to live at the mercy of impulse. There is a version of you that is fully awake, a version that starts each day with clarity and intention. That version does not wait to feel ready or motivated. That version simply decides and then moves without asking permission. And right now, that version is waiting somewhere deep inside, waiting for you to finally pick up the reins and lead. There is a moment every person on this earth knows. It is the moment right before you almost give up. Your hands are tired. Your heart is heavy and uncertain. And a voice inside says, This is too hard now. That voice does not come from outside. It comes from within. It rises quietly from the deepest corners of your mind. And in that moment, everything you have built feels very fragile. Every dream you carried starts to feel like a burden. Most people in that moment make the same familiar choice. They stop, they step back. They call it being realistic. They wrap their fear in very reasonable sounding words. They say, maybe this is not meant for me now. But what if that moment is not a stop sign? What if that moment is actually the real starting line? Because fear does not visit people who have nothing to lose. Fear only rises when something truly important is at stake. The bigger the dream, the louder the fear will speak. The closer you get to greatness, the harder the resistance becomes. This is not a coincidence. This is simply how the path to growth has always worked. Every person who ever built something meaningful felt this exact feeling, that cold and heavy weight sitting right on their chest. The entrepreneur who almost closed their business on a Tuesday, the student who almost quit school in the final semester, the athlete who sat in the locker room unable to move, wondering if all the sacrifice was even worth it anymore. They all hear D, the same loud and convincing voice of fear. But something inside them chose discipline over that convincing voice. Not because they were fearless, they were never truly fearless, but because they understood that discipline is a decision, not a feeling. You will never feel like being disciplined in hard moments. Your emotions will always vote for comfort over growth, every time. But discipline does not ask how you feel right now. Discipline simply asks what you committed to and why it mattered. When fear speaks, it always speaks in the present tense. It says you are tired now, you are broken now. But discipline speaks in the future tense every single time. It says, think about who you will become after this. And that shift, that tiny shift in where your eyes look, that is what separates the people who arrive from those who don't. You have already survived every hard moment that came before today. Every time you thought you could not go on, you did. That is not weakness. That is evidence of something very powerful. That is proof that you are stronger than your loudest fear. But surviving is different from choosing. Surviving is different from leading. Surviving means fear brought you through. Discipline means you walked through yourself. There is a version of every hard moment that you control, where you feel the full weight of fear and still move, where your legs are shaking but your direction remains completely clear, where the voice gets loud but your commitment gets even louder. That is not something you are born with naturally inside you. That is something you build, one hard moment at a time. And right now, life is handing you exactly that moment, the moment where fear is speaking and waiting to see your answer. Most people spend years wondering why their life feels stuck. They change their job, their city, their friends, their routine. They rearrange everything on the outside, hoping something will shift. But the one thing they never change is their thinking. And so they carry the same weak thoughts into every new beginning, and every new beginning slowly starts to look like the old one. This is the quiet trap that most people never see. You do not live in a house, you live in thoughts. Every single experience you have is filtered through your thinking first. The same event can destroy one person and awaken another completely. The difference is never the event. The difference is always the thought you choose to attach to what happens around you. A weak thought says, "This happened to me. I am stuck." A strong thought says, "This happened for me. I will grow." That single shift in one word changes the entire direction of life, from victim to student, from broken to being built stronger. But weak thoughts do not announce themselves with obvious warning signs. They come dressed in very quiet and very familiar language. They sound like, "I am not smart enough for this dream." They sound like, "People like me do not succeed like that." They sound like, "Maybe I should just wait a little longer." They sound like, "Now is not quite the right time yet." And you have heard these thoughts so many times before today that you stopped questioning them and started believing them as truth. But a thought repeated is not the same as a truth-proven. Repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity feels very much like fact. This is why some people carry limitations for their entire lifetime. Not because the limitations are real, but because the thoughts are loud. Your brain is not trying to hold you back from greatness. Your brain is simply trying to protect you from unfamiliar discomfort. Weak thoughts are the brain's way of keeping you safely small, safely inside the borders of everything you have already survived before. But you were not designed to only survive what you already know. You were built to stretch into territories that currently feel impossible. And that stretching begins not in your actions, but in your thinking. Before the body moves forward, the mind must first believe forward. Think about everything you have already built in your life today. Every relationship, every skill, every small victory came from one thought first. Someone once told you that you were capable of something real. Or maybe you told yourself quietly in a moment of rare courage. And that one strong thought cracked open a door inside you. And through that door walked a version of you nobody expected. That is the power sitting inside one single quality thought. Not a loud thought, not a perfect thought, just a strong one. A strong thought does not need to be confident or fearless. A strong thought simply needs to be honest and forward-facing. It says, I do not know how, but I will begin. It says, I am not ready, but I will start anyway. It says, the road is long, but my direction is clear. It says, I have failed before, but I am not finished yet. These are not the thoughts of perfect or extraordinary people only. These are the thoughts of ordinary people who refused to think weakly. And right now, your mind is sitting at a very quiet crossroads, where the weak thought and the strong thought are both waiting patiently. There is a story you have told yourself for a long time, that the reason you have not arrived yet is resources. You said if I had their money, I would succeed too. You said if I had their connections, everything would be different now. You looked at people who made it and saw their advantages. You counted what they had, and then counted what you lacked. And that counting felt honest. It felt like clear, logical thinking. But that counting was quietly keeping you from your own power, because the most successful people this world has ever seen clearly were not always the ones who started with the most resources. They were the ones who started with the strongest inner foundation, and that foundation was not built from money or privilege or luck. It was built from one decision made in a very dark moment, the decision to control what lived and moved inside their own mind. History is full of names that started with almost absolutely nothing. No money, no mentor, no map, no guaranteed path forward at all. But they had something that cannot be bought from any store. They had a fierce and unshakable command over their inner world. They decided what thoughts were allowed to stay inside their mind. They decided what voices were worth listening to and worth ignoring. They built walls not to keep the world entirely out forever, but to keep their own clarity and their own vision protected daily. Because when you have very little on the outside, it is easy. It is easy to let the outside world define your inside world. When the bank account is empty, the mind wants to feel empty. When opportunities look scarce, the mind begins to think in scarcity. And scarcity thinking is the most expensive thing a person can carry. It costs you more than any debt, more than any missed opportunity. Because scarcity thinking makes you small before the world even touches you. You shrink yourself down before anyone else even gets the chance to. But the people who built empires from empty hands thought differently. They looked at their empty hands and saw potential, not poverty. They looked at their limited resources and asked a completely different question. Not why do I have so little, but what can I do? That question, that single question, is worth more than any inheritance, because it shifts the mind from counting lack to creating possibility, and creating possibility from nothing is the purest form of human power. It is the power that No economy and no circumstance can ever think about someone in your own life who came from very little. Someone who grew up without the advantages the world said were necessary, and yet somehow they moved, they built, they refused to stay still. Not because life became easier, but because their inner world became stronger. They did not wait for the perfect moment or the perfect resources. They used the imperfect moment and the imperfect resources they already had, and every small thing they built with what little they had. Taught their mind that they were capable of building something even greater. This is how inner control compounds over time, just like interest. Every act of discipline done with little proves you can do more. Every time you create something from nothing, you rewire your belief system. You teach yourself at the deepest level that you are not limited, and that lesson, once learned deep inside the bones of who you are, cannot be unlearned by any failure, any loss, any setback that comes, because you have already proven to yourself what you are made from. You have already seen with your own eyes what inner control produces. Right now, someone somewhere has far less than what you currently have, and they are moving, building, growing, refusing to use lack as excuse. And right now, you are sitting with more than you fully realize, more strength, more ability, more untapped potential than you have ever used. There is a feeling you have felt, but rarely talk about. It visits you in the quiet moments when the world goes still. Late at night, when the noise of the day finally fades, and it is just you alone with your own honest thoughts. In that silence, something stirs, something shifts, something speaks without words. It does not accuse you, it does not shame you at all. It simply reminds you with a gentle but very persistent presence that the life you are living is not yet your fullest life. This is not depression. This is not dissatisfaction with what you have. This is something much deeper and much more important than simple unhappiness. This is the voice of your unlived potential knocking from the inside. Knocking not to punish you, but to remind you of direction. Every single human being on this earth carries this awareness inside. The awareness that somewhere between who they are and who they could be, there exists a gap, a sacred and important and very real gap. And that gap is not a sign of failure or of weakness. That gap is actually the most honest map you will ever hold. It shows you exactly where your next level of growth is waiting. Most people feel this awareness and immediately try to silence it completely. They fill the silence with noise, with screens, with endless empty distraction. Because sitting with that awareness feels uncomfortable and sometimes even painful. It asks questions that do not have easy or comfortable answers yet. It asks, are you becoming who you always said you would become? It asks, are you moving toward the life that lives inside you? And those questions feel heavy when the honest answer is not yet. So most people choose distraction over the discomfort of honest self-awareness. But the people who eventually step into their fullest and truest life are the people who learn to sit with that awareness without running. They learn to let that quiet voice speak without immediately silencing it. They listened not with fear, but with curiosity, and with open hands, because that awareness is not your enemy, it is your greatest guide. It knows things about you that your current circumstances cannot yet show. It knows the ceiling you have not yet reached, the room not yet entered. It knows the version of you that is waiting beyond your current comfort, and every time you have ignored it, you felt a certain kind of heaviness, a heaviness that no achievement and no distraction could completely take away. Because you cannot outrun your own potential, it travels everywhere with you. It sits with you at dinner, it wakes up with you daily. It watches every decision you make with a quiet and patient knowing that one day you will stop running and finally turn around. And when you turn around, you will not find something frightening waiting. You will find something that looks remarkably and beautifully familiar to you. You will find a version of yourself that you have always known existed. A version that never stopped believing even when you stopped believing in yourself. This awareness that you carry is not a burden placed upon you. It is a gift given to you before you even understood gifts. It was placed inside you as a compass, not as a critic, pointing always toward the truest and most expansive version of your life. And every time you have taken one small and courageous step forward, that awareness grew a little quieter because you were finally moving toward it. But every time you stayed still out of comfort or out of fear, that awareness grew a little louder because it needed you to hear it. Right now, in this very moment, that awareness is fully awake inside you. It has been patient. It has been waiting. It has never left you. And somewhere between the life you are living and the life you feel, there is a door that only you have the ability to open.